Nosy, why is it wet?
David, I don't know. I didn't feel it happen. I swear to you, I didn't feel it.
You didn't feel it. This is our wedding night. My mother is sleeping in the next room. My aunties came all the way from bless this marriage. And I am sitting here at midnight, holding a wet mattress like a child holding his father's shame.
Please lower your voice.
Lower my voice. Ngozi, who did I marry?
By sunrise, the woman he had paid a dowry for, the woman his whole village had danced for 3 nights to celebrate, would become a secret his own family was ashamed to say out loud, and it would take 6 months of silence, one broken woman's prayer, and a covenant made before she was even born, before either of them understood why. Stay with us as we unfold the whole story. 14 years before that wedding night, Ngozi was a girl of 9, sleeping under a roof so thin that when the rain fell hard, her mother would move her mat 3 times in one night just to keep her dry. Her mother, Mama Chiamaka, had waited 11 years for a child, 11 years of empty arms, 11 years of relatives, whispering behind cupped hands at every family gathering. So when the old priestess at the stream shrine told her that the river spirit would open her womb, if and only if, she brought the child back at the age of marriage to complete the last rite. Mama Chiamaka did not hesitate. She poured the palm wine on the shrine floor with her own hands and made the vow. 9 months later, Ngozi was born. But 3 years after that, a small church crusade came to the village with a white tent and a generator-powered speaker, and Mama Chiamaka gave her life to Christ. She stopped attending the shrine. She stopped speaking the old prayers. She believed in her heart that the blood of Jesus had washed away every vow she had ever made in darkness. And she never went back to formally break the covenant before the priestess, before the elders, before anyone who could call it closed. She only walked away. What Mama Chiamaka never told her soul, nor even Ngozi, was one line the old priestess had said the day she made the vow. A covenant spoken before the deity does not end when you stop visiting the shrine. It ends when it is answered, or when it is renounced before the same ground it was made on. She had heard it. She had simply chosen to forget it. Ngozi grew up gentle and quick-fingered, the kind of girl who could take a torn wrapper and turn it into something a tailor would be proud of. By 12, she was already better with a needle than the women who had taught her. She kept a small exercise book, its cover long gone, its pages soft from handling, where she wrote down Bible verses. Her Sunday school teacher read aloud, copying each one twice so she would never forget it. It was a small, quiet habit. Nobody thought much of it. One evening, as she stitched by lantern light, her grandmother took her hand and said the words Ngozi would carry for the rest of her life. Ngozi, my daughter. A person is like a market. People will only ever see what you put out on display. Whatever you are hiding, hide it in God's hands, not in silence. Silence rots, God's hands preserve. Ngozi nodded, the way children nod at things they don't yet understand. By the time Ngozi turned 22, something strange had started happening. Suitor after suitor came, good men, serious men, and one after another, the introductions fell apart. One man's family suddenly relocated. Another simply stopped calling without a single explanation. Within 4 years, 7 engagements had quietly died before the wine-carrying ceremony could even be scheduled. The village began to talk. Ngozi is not meant for marriage, they said. Something is following that girl. Then David Okafor came. He was a soft-spoken supervisor at a construction firm in Owerri, raised in a small Pentecostal church, the kind of man who still bowed his head before every meal even when eating alone. He met Ngozi at his cousin's baby dedication, and in less than 5 months, a courtship faster than either of their families expected, he was kneeling in her father's compound with kola nut in his hand. Ngozi, I don't have much, but I have never wanted a wife the way I want you. I don't need a queen. I need a partner, someone who will build with me, not just live beside me. That word, partner, settled into Ngozi like a seed. It was the first time in 4 years a man had spoken about a future with her instead of quietly disappearing from it. Mama Chiamaka and Ngozi sat together the night before the introduction, and for one long, "Mama, should we tell him anything about the suitors before him? Tell him what, Ngozi, that your own mother doesn't fully understand it herself. He's a praying man. Let us not frighten away the one good thing God has finally sent you." Ngozi looked at her mother's face, tired, hopeful, afraid, and she let the moment pass, not out of deceit, out of love, out of the fear of losing, one more time, the only man who had stayed. They never spoke of it again, not before the dowry was paid, not before the wine carrying, not before David's mother sold the Asu Ebai for 200 guests. The bedwetting did not appear on the wedding night by accident. It had been happening on and off for years, always in seasons of stress. Ngozi's mother had spent whatever small money she had on herbalists, on special water from 3 different prophets, on a mattress protector she quietly repurchased twice a year and never explained to anyone. Nobody outside their 2-room house knew what that money had gone to. It was the family's first hidden debt, paid in silence, carried alone. 2 weeks after the wedding, David's mother found the stained sheet before the house girl could remove it. By evening, it had reached 3 separate WhatsApp groups in the extended family. At the next Sunday cookout, David's auntie leaned toward another woman and said, just loud enough, "Imagine all that dowry, all that dancing, for a woman who cannot even control herself at night. What kind of home did her mother raise her in?" Ngozi was standing 4 feet away, pretending to season a pot of soup when she heard it. By month 3, David had stopped sleeping in the same room. By month 5, he had stopped speaking to her directly, communicating instead through his younger sister. And on one Friday night, after another wet sheet and another argument, David packed a small bag and told her flatly, "Go and stay with your mother for a while. I need to think. I don't know what I married." He did not raise his hand. He did not curse her. But the silence he left behind was its own kind of confinement. A woman locked out of her own marriage while still technically living inside it. It was Ngozi's childhood friend, Adai's. Now a young mother herself, married into a family 2 streets from the old shrine, who first heard the full story from her own grandmother, the retired priestess's niece. "Ngozi, I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but my grandmother kept records, old cloth-bound books from the shrine days. I saw your mother's name in one of them, written in the priestess's own hand." She placed her phone on the table, a photograph of a brittle page, ink faded but legible, dated the year of Ngozi's birth, a vow, a name, a condition never fulfilled. Ngozi's hands did not shake, her voice did not rise. She simply reached for the pot on the stove, the one she'd been stirring the entire conversation, and turned off the gas. With her hand so unsteady, she knocked the spoon straight into the flame, melting its handle before she even noticed. That small, involuntary mistake was the only sign that, underneath her stillness, something in her had cracked. That same week, David's mother, tired of the whispers reaching her own friends, told Ngozi plainly, in front of 2 of her sisters-in-law, "Pack your things. Go back to your mother's house until my son decides what he wants to do with this marriage." Ngozi stood at the gate of the house she had called home for 5 months, a single bag at her feet, the same gate she had walked through as a bride with dancers behind her. If you were Ngozi, standing at that gate with nowhere certain to go, would you have told the truth 6 months earlier, even at the risk of losing him? Or would you have done exactly what her mother did and hoped love would be enough to outrun the truth? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you would have done. Ngozi did not cry at the gate. She picked up her bag, walked to her mother's house, and sat quietly on the same low stool she used to sit on as a girl, stitching by lantern light. She began to think. She thought back to the exercise book she still kept, now 3 books thick, filled with verses copied twice each, a habit she never grew out of. She thought of her grandmother's voice, A person is like a market. You only see what they put out on display. She thought of the priestess's old words, the ones Adais had shown her, and something clicked into place that had nothing to do with fear anymore. He had told her so himself, without knowing it. On the night he proposed, David had said he didn't need a queen. He needed a partner, someone to build with, not someone to hide from. If that was true, then a partnership couldn't survive on silence. It had survived so far on exactly the wrong kind of silence. A mother's silence before the shrine, and her own silence before her husband. The plan that formed in Ngozi's mind that night used nothing she didn't already have. Her needle-quick hands, which had quietly been sewing choir robes for the church for extra income, her 3 exercise books of memorized scripture, and one decision she had never had the courage to make out loud, to finally tell David everything, herself, in her own words, without her mother softening it, and without Adais delivering it second-hand. It happened in ordinary, unremarkable steps. She called Adais and asked plainly for the photograph of the shrine record and for her grandmother's phone number. She asked her pastor's wife, the same woman she sold choir robes for, to sit with her mother gently and help Mama Chiamaka finally do the thing she had never done, return, not to the shrine in fear, but to the same ground, publicly with the pastor and 2 church elders present, and speak a formal renunciation of the vow, closing in words what she had only ever closed in silence years before. Neighbors who saw the small group walking toward the old stream path that Saturday morning assumed it was simply a prayer walk, nothing unusual for a church that liked open-air intercession. Nobody suspected they were watching the exact moment a 14-year-old death was finally being settled. David knew none of this was happening. He was, at that point, still 3 towns away, staying with his brother, still telling himself he was thinking. Ngozi called him herself, not through his sister, not through his mother. David, I need 15 minutes, not to defend myself, just to tell you the truth, all of it, and then whatever you decide, I will accept it. She told him everything. Her mother's vow, the priestess's record, the renunciation done that same week before witnesses, and her own silence, which she did not excuse, only explained. I was afraid of losing you the way I lost every man before you. That fear made me wrong. I'm not asking you to forget that. I'm only asking you to know the whole truth before you decide anything. David said nothing for a long time on the phone. Then, quietly, 6 months, Nosy. 6 months I made you carry this alone, and you're the one apologizing to me. He did not shout. He did not accuse her father. Something in the plain, itemized honesty of what she'd said had already begun to soften ground that 6 months of silence had made hard. Word moved through the family the way it always does, not through David's announcement, but through his mother, who heard the pastor's wife tell it first, and softened before her son even came home. By the time David returned to the village, it wasn't his mother's shame at the wedding that people remembered anymore. It was the picture of a young wife who had walked humbly and without hiding into the very ground her family's secret had come from, to close it herself. That night, alone in his brother's guest room, David could not sleep. He thought of his own words on the day he proposed, I need a partner, and the 6 months he had spent, instead, treating her like a burden to be managed rather than a partner to be understood. He knelt by the bed, the way he had knelt as a boy in his mother's church, and for the first time in months, he prayed, not for himself, but for her, quietly. God, I called myself a man who loves you, but I have treated my wife the way the village treated her, like a shameful secret. Forgive me. Show me how to fix what I let sit broken for 6 months. He said later that he felt no lightning, no dramatic sign, only a quiet, settled certainty, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. By morning, he had already called Ngozi's mother to ask, simply, when he could come and bring his wife home. 2 years later, Ngozi stands in a small shop with a hand-painted sign above the door. The same quick fingers that once stitched torn wrappers by lantern light now dress brides for their own wedding days. Women who come to her in part because she is known as the seamstress who tells every anxious bride, gently, the same thing her grandmother once told her. A person is like a market. You only see what they put out on display. Whatever you're hiding, don't hide it in silence. Hide it in God's hands. Silence rots. His hands preserve. David never brings up the wedding night anymore, except once a year, on their anniversary, when he tells the story himself, not as a shame, but as the year he learned what the word partner actually cost to live out. The bedwetting, for the record, resolved on its own within a year of the renunciation, quietly, without ceremony, the way most real healing does. Ngozi, unlocking the door of her own shop on a Monday morning, key in her own hand, sign swinging gently above her, a woman who once stood locked outside the gate with a single bag at her feet, now the one holding every key that matters.
Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe to African Folktale by Zoya. Turn on the notification so when I post more interesting stories, you will be the first to get them. I really appreciate you. I do not take your support for granted. Bye for now.